The resignation letter slipped from Amara's trembling fingers when Jin-sang locked his office door behind her and said,
"You're not leaving Korea. I'm offering you something better than a work visa."
The 71-year-old Korean weathered-pulled man she'd cared for threw 2 heart attacks of velvet box from his desk.
"Marry me tonight, become my wife instead of my employee, and I'll make sure you never have to worry about deportation, your daughter's school fees, or whether immigration sends you back to Nigeria tomorrow."
If you've ever had to choose between security and freedom, subscribe right now because Amara is about to discover that some proposals aren't requests. They're lifelines disguised as chains. The resignation letter had taken Amara 3 weeks to write, each word carefully chosen in the English she'd perfected during 8 years in Korea as a live-in caregiver. After thoughtful consideration, I have decided to return to Nigeria to be closer to my family. My last day of service will be June 30th. Thank you for the opportunity. Professional, clean, final. She'd planned to hand it to Jin-sang during their usual Tuesday morning routine, his breakfast, his medications, the financial review where he went over household accounts with the precision of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. But when she entered his study at precisely 8 a.m. holding the envelope, Amara found him already waiting with the velvet box open on his mahogany desk, a marriage certificate spread beside it, and an expression she'd never seen in 8 years of changing his clothes, monitoring his heart rate, and keeping him alive through medical crises that would have killed weaker men. "Sit down, Amara," Jin-sang said, his 71-year-old voice carrying the authority that had apparently commanded a significant portion of Seoul's underground economy before age and illness forced him into legitimate retirement. "We need to discuss your future. Mr. Choi, I have something to tell you," Amara started, holding up her resignation letter. "I know what you're planning." He gestured at the papers on his desk. "You think you're going back to Lagos to finally meet the daughter you've been sending money to for 8 years. The 12-year-old girl whose school fees and living expenses you've funded through an agency while working here to give her opportunities Nigeria couldn't provide. Am I correct?" Amara's throat tightened. She never discussed Zainab with him beyond brief mentions, had kept that part of her life separate from her work caring for this difficult, demanding, surprisingly generous old man who'd become more familiar to her than her own family. "Yes, sir. It's time." "It's based on a lie." Jin-sang pushed a manila folder across the desk. "Open it." Her hands shook as she lifted the folder flap. Inside were documents, DNA test results, agency investigation reports, photographs of a woman in Lagos who looked nothing like Amara collecting money transfers. The words blurred together, but the essential truth emerged with devastating clarity. The daughter she'd been supporting wasn't her biological child. The agency had been running a scam for years, taking payments from foreign workers and distributing them to various families in Nigeria while providing fake updates about children who either didn't exist or weren't related to the workers sending money. "How long have you known?" Amara whispered. 3 months. Jin-sang's expression was unreadable. "I had my people investigate after you mentioned planning to return to Nigeria. I wanted to ensure you weren't walking into a dangerous situation, and what I found was worse than danger, it was fraud. The girl you think is your daughter is actually the child of a woman who's been receiving your money through the agency. Your real daughter, the one you gave up for adoption 12 years ago when you left Nigeria, is living in London with her adopted family and has no idea you exist." The room spun. Amara gripped the edge of the desk, her 34-year-old body suddenly feeling ancient. 8 years of sacrifice, of living in a foreign country caring for a stranger while believing she was providing for her child, of enduring loneliness and homesickness, because at least Zainab had a better life, all of it built on fabrication. "Why are you telling me this?" Her voice cracked. "Why not just let me go back to Nigeria and discover it myself?" "Because I'm selfish." Jin-sang stood slowly, his movements careful around the oxygen tank that had become his constant companion after the second heart attack 6 months ago. "I've spent 8 years with you, Amara. You know my routines, my preferences, my medical history better than my doctors. You've seen me at my weakest, kept me alive when I probably should have died, and never once treated me like I was fragile or pathetic. You see me as a person, not a patient. And somewhere in those 8 years, I stopped seeing you as an employee. Mr. Choi." Let me finish. He moved around the desk with surprising steadiness. I'm 71 years old. I have maybe 5 years left if I'm lucky, 2 or 3 if I'm realistic. My children from my first marriage visit twice a year out of obligation and spend the entire time calculating their inheritance. My ex-wife hasn't spoken to me in a decade. I have money, property, investments, everything except a reason to keep fighting to stay alive. Amara found herself standing, some instinct telling her this conversation was heading somewhere she wasn't prepared for. You have plenty of reasons. I have you. Jean Sang's hand settled on the velvet box. For 8 years, I've had you. Your voice in the morning reminding me to take medication. Your insistence that I eat vegetables even though I hate them. Your laugh when I make terrible jokes. Your presence that makes this enormous empty house feel less like a mausoleum. And the thought of losing you to a daughter who doesn't exist, is unacceptable to me. He opened the velvet box, revealing a ring that was clearly expensive but not ostentatious, a single diamond on a platinum band, elegant and understated. Marry me, Amara. Not as my employee, not as my caregiver, but as my wife. Let me give you legal status in Korea that doesn't depend on a work visa. Let me make you my heir so when I die, you inherit everything instead of children who've never cared whether I lived or died. And in exchange, give me however many years I have left with someone who actually wants me alive. Drop a comment right now, is this romantic or manipulative? Subscribe to see which one Amara believes. ****. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft hiss of Jean Sang's oxygen tank. Amara stared at the ring, her mind racing through 8 years of memories that suddenly looked different through this new lens. Every conversation where he'd asked about her day with genuine interest. Every time he'd insisted she take time off even when she protested she was fine. The way he'd learned to make Nigerian jollof rice because she'd mentioned missing it. The Christmas bonus that was always exactly enough to cover the fake Zainab's school fees for the year. Had he been planning this for months? Years? Or was this a desperate impulse from a dying man facing mortality? You don't love me, Amara said finally, testing the waters of reality. You can't. I'm your employee. It's not real. Love. Jean Sang laughed, but it wasn't cruel, it was almost sad. At my age, Amara, love is a luxury I don't have time for. What I have is appreciation, respect, and genuine affection for someone who's seen the worst of me and stayed anyway. Is that love? Maybe not the romantic kind. But it's real, and it's more than most people get in a lifetime. I'm 34. You're 71. She tried another angle. People will think. People will think whatever they want regardless of what we do. He closed the velvet box with a soft click. But Korean society respects marriage, even unusual ones. As my wife, you'll have legal protections, social status, and financial security that you'll never have as a foreign worker. And when I'm gone, you'll have the resources to find your real daughter in London if you choose, or build whatever life you want without worrying about money. And what do you get? Amara demanded. Really? Honestly? I get to die knowing someone will miss me. Jean Sang's vulnerability in that moment was startling. I've lived 71 years, Amara. Built businesses, made money, survived enemies, raised children who barely tolerate me. And at the end of all that, the only person who knows how I take my coffee, who notices when my breathing is labored before I do, who sits with me during insomnia at 3 a.m., and doesn't make me feel like a burden, that's you. So yes, I'm being selfish. I want to keep you. And I'm willing to offer marriage, legal status, and financial security to make that happen. Amara sank back into the chair, overwhelmed. The resignation letter in her hand felt like a relic from a different life, the one where she'd believed she had a daughter waiting in Nigeria, where returning home was simple, where her future was mapped out. Now that life was revealed as fiction, and in its place was this bizarre proposal from a man she'd cared for but never considered romantically. I need time to think, she said. You have until tonight. Jean Sang returned to his own chair, suddenly looking every one of his 71 years. My lawyer is coming at 8 p.m. with the marriage documents. If you sign them, we'll register the marriage tomorrow morning and begin the process of changing your visa status from worker to spouse. If you don't sign, I'll provide you with severance pay and a reference letter, and you'll be free to return to Nigeria or go anywhere else you choose. But I need an answer tonight because I don't have time to waste, and neither do you. Why tonight? Why the rush? His hand moved to his chest, a gesture Amara recognized from 8 years of monitoring his heart condition. Because I had another episode 3 days ago. Not severe enough for the hospital, but significant enough that my cardiologist is recommending I update my will and finalize any important decisions. I'm running out of time, Amara. And I'd rather spend whatever time I have left with you as my wife than as my employee counting down days until you leave. The raw honesty hit harder than manipulation would have. Amara studied his face, the lines carved by 7 decades of living, the intelligence in his eyes that age hadn't dimmed, the tremor in his hands that betrayed how much this conversation cost him. This wasn't a powerful man demanding compliance. This was someone facing death and asking for companionship. Can I ask you something? She said carefully. If I say no, will you still help me find my real daughter? Or was that information leverage to get me to agree? Jinseng smiled, and it was genuine. I'll help you regardless. The investigation file has her adopted parents' contact information in London. Whether you marry me or not, that's yours. I'm not holding your daughter hostage for your compliance, Amara. I'm simply offering you a choice. Go to London with nothing but hope that your daughter wants to meet you, or stay in Korea with legal security and resources to build whatever relationship with her you want from a position of strength. He stood again, moving toward the door. I'll leave you alone to think. The file is yours to keep. The ring will be here on my desk. And at 8 p.m., I'll be in this room with my lawyer. What happens next is entirely your decision. After he left, Amara sat in the sudden silence, the investigation file heavy in her hands. She opened it fully, reading details about her biological daughter, now 12 years old, living in London with adopted parents who were both doctors, attending an excellent school, by all accounts happy and well-adjusted. There were recent photographs showing a beautiful girl with Amara's eyes and smile, laughing with her adopted family. Her real daughter existed, was thriving, and had no idea Amara was alive. The revelation was both devastating and liberating. 8 years of sacrifice hadn't been for nothing, they just hadn't been for who she'd thought. And now she had a choice that was impossible in its complexity. Option 1. Return to Nigeria with nothing, try to reconnect with the family she'd been separated from for 8 years, and live in the same poverty that had driven her to leave in the first place. From there, somehow find the money and resources to travel to London and attempt contact with a daughter who might reject her entirely. Option 2. Stay in Korea as Jinseng's employee until her visa expired or he died, then face the same uncertainties as Option 1, but with some savings and a reference letter. Option 3. Marry Jinseng, gain legal status in Korea, inherit significant wealth when he died, and use those resources to approach her daughter from a position of stability rather than desperation. Put that way, Option 3 was obviously practical. But it also felt like trading one form of servitude for another, exchanging her role as paid caregiver for unpaid wife, with the added complication of whatever expectations came with marriage to a man she'd never considered romantically. Hit subscribe if you think she should take the deal, or comment if this feels wrong, because what Amara decides in the next 6 hours determines everything. Amara spent the day in a fog, going through her usual routines mechanically. She prepared Jinseng's lunch, administered his afternoon medications, and organized his evening clothes while her mind worked through scenarios and outcomes. He didn't pressure her, didn't bring up the proposal again, just accepted her care with the quiet gratitude he always showed. At 7 p.m., she finally asked the question that had been gnawing at her all day. What would this marriage actually look like? What would you expect from me? Jinseng looked up from the book he'd been reading. Honestly? Not much different from now. You'd still manage the household because you're better at it than anyone I could hire. You'd still remind me to take my medication because I forget. You'd still tell me when I'm being unreasonable because someone needs to. The only differences would be legal status and sleeping arrangements. Sleeping arrangements? Amara's voice rose slightly. Separate bedrooms if you prefer, he said quickly. I'm not demanding physical intimacy, Amara. At my age and with my health, that's not realistic anyway. But I would like the option of your company, falling asleep knowing someone is in the next room, having breakfast together as husband and wife rather than employer and employee. The comfort of companionship without the isolation of separate lives. And if you want more than companionship, then I'll ask, and you'll have the right to say no. His gaze was steady. I'm not offering you freedom from my presence, Amara. I'm offering you freedom from financial insecurity, visa uncertainty, and the powerlessness of being a foreign worker in a country that can deport you at will. In exchange, I get your company and care for however long I have left. It's a transaction, yes, but an honest one. What about your children? Won't they contest the marriage, the inheritance? Let them try. Something hard entered Jinsang's expression. I built everything I have from nothing. They contributed zero beyond being born. If they want to fight over my will after I'm dead, they can waste their inheritance on lawyers while you live comfortably in London near your daughter, if that's what you choose. The 8 p.m. meeting arrived too quickly. Amara entered Jinsang's study to find him seated with an older man in an expensive suit, the lawyer, presumably, and documents spread across the desk. The marriage certificate. Prenuptial agreement. Updated will. Everything prepared with the efficiency of someone who'd built an empire on careful planning. Miss Amara, the lawyer greeted her in excellent English. Mr. Choi has explained his proposal? He has, Amara confirmed, her voice steadier than she felt. Then let me clarify the legal aspects. The lawyer gestured to the documents. The marriage would be legally binding in Korea and recognized internationally. The prenuptial agreement specifies that in the event of Mr. Choi's death, you inherit his primary residence, a monthly stipend of 10 million won for life, and 50% of his liquid assets. The other 50% is divided among his children. In the event of divorce initiated by either party, you receive the residence and a one-time settlement of 500 million won. All debts, legal liabilities, and business obligations remain separate. Do you have any questions? Amara's head spun with the numbers. 10 million won monthly was roughly $8,000, more money than she'd made in a year in Nigeria. 500 million won was over $400,000. The residence was worth millions. Even the lesser divorce settlement would set her up for life. This is too much, she said. I'm just his caregiver. You're the person who kept me alive and sane for 8 years, Jinsang interrupted. You're worth every one, Amara. The question is whether you believe that. She looked at the documents, at the ring still sitting in its velvet box, at the 71-year-old man offering her security in exchange for companionship. It wasn't love. It wasn't romance. But it was honest, and in its strange way, it was kind. If I sign this, Amara said slowly, I need one promise from you. Name it. Help me contact my daughter in London. Not to disrupt her life or make demands, but to let her know I exist if she ever wants to know. Set up a trust fund for her education if you're being generous with money anyway. And when you die, her voice caught, surprising her with genuine emotion. When you die, let me have been a real wife to you, not just someone playing a role for legal benefits. Jinsang's eyes brightened with something that might have been tears. I promise all of that. And Amara? You've already been more of a real wife to me than any legal ceremony could make you. This is just paperwork catching up with reality. She picked up the pen. The marriage registration happened the next morning at a government office, quick and bureaucratic and utterly lacking in romance. But when the official handed them the registered certificate, Amara felt the weight of transformation. She was no longer a temporary foreign worker subject to deportation at any moment. She was Mrs. Choi Amara, legally protected, financially secure, and tied to a man she was still trying to understand. Comment below if you think this was the right choice. Smash that like button if you believe in practical love over romantic love, and subscribe to see what happens when Amara's old life collides with her new one. The weeks that followed were strange in their normalcy. Amara continued her caregiving routines, but now they were framed as wifely duties rather than employment. She moved her belongings from the small servant's room she'd occupied for 8 years to the guest bedroom adjacent to Jinsang's master suite. They took meals together with new awareness of their changed relationship. And gradually, awkwardly, they learned to be married. Jin-sang was surprisingly thoughtful as a husband. He asked her opinion on household decisions he'd previously made unilaterally. He insisted she take a monthly allowance for personal expenses separate from household funds. He arranged for her to take Korean citizenship classes and hired a tutor to help her improve her already decent Korean. Small gestures that acknowledged she was now family, not staff. But he also remained himself, demanding about his routines, stubborn about medical advice, occasionally condescending in the way powerful men often were. Amara navigated these moments with the expertise of 8 years' practice, but now she pushed back more firmly because she could. Because she was his wife, not his employee, and that distinction mattered. 3 months into the marriage, Amara woke at 2 a.m. to find Jin-sang standing in her doorway, his breathing labored, his hand clutching his chest. She was beside him in seconds, checking his pulse, calling his cardiologist, administering the emergency medications she kept stocked. The ambulance arrived within minutes, and they spent the night in the hospital while doctors stabilized him after another cardiac episode. "You should have woken me sooner," Amara scolded him in the hospital room the next morning, exhausted and terrified and angry. "I didn't want to worry you," Jin-sang said weakly. "I'm your wife. Worrying is part of the job description." The words came out sharper than she intended, but they were true. Somewhere in the past 3 months, her concern for him had shifted from professional to personal. She wasn't sure when it happened, but the thought of losing him now hurt in ways that had nothing to do with inheritance or legal status. Jin-sang smiled tiredly. "So you're actually my wife now? Not just playing the role?" "I'm still deciding," Amara admitted. "But you dying before I figure it out would be extremely inconvenient, so please try to stay alive." "For you? I'll do my best." He stayed in the hospital for a week, and Amara barely left his side. She fielded calls from his children, who suddenly appeared when medical crisis threatened their inheritance, with polite firmness, refusing to let them stress him with their demands for updates and reassurances about the will. She coordinated with doctors, adjusted medication schedules, and ensured he rested even when he protested he was fine. And she realized, somewhere in that week of crisis management, that she'd stopped seeing him as her employer or even just her husband in legal terms. He'd become someone she genuinely cared about. Someone whose continued existence mattered beyond practical considerations. The revelation was terrifying. When they returned home, Amara made a decision. That night, instead of retreating to her own bedroom, she knocked on Jin-sang's door. "Can I stay here tonight?" "Not for just to sleep. I want to be close enough to hear if you need help." His surprise was evident, but he pulled back the covers in invitation. They lay side by side in the darkness, both fully clothed, not touching but aware of each other's presence. It should have been awkward. Instead, it felt right. "Thank you," Jin-sang said quietly. "For staying. For caring. For not giving up on me even when I'm difficult." "You're welcome," Amara replied. "And thank you for being honest about what you wanted from this marriage. I know it's unconventional, but at least it's real." "Is it real for you now? Or still just practical?" Amara considered the question honestly. "Both. It's still practical. I'm not going to pretend I'd have married you if I wasn't facing deportation and didn't need legal status. But it's also becoming real. You're becoming real to me as a husband, not just as someone I care for. I'm not sure I love you yet, but I think I could. Given time." "We don't have much time," Jin-sang reminded her gently. "My cardiologist says I'm living on borrowed days now." "Then we'll make the days count." Amara reached across the space between them, finding his hand in the darkness. "However many we have." They fell asleep holding hands, and it was the first of many nights they'd spend that way, finding comfort in companionship, building intimacy slowly through shared vulnerability rather than passion. Subscribe if you believe love can grow from practical beginnings, drop a comment about your most unconventional relationship, and hit like if you think sometimes the best marriages start with honesty instead of romance. 6 months into their marriage, Amara received a letter from London. Jin-sang's lawyer had made contact with her daughter's adopted family, explaining the situation carefully and asking if they'd be willing to facilitate communication. The response was cautious but positive. Amara's daughter, whose adopted name was Sophia, had expressed curiosity about her biological mother. The adopted parents were willing to arrange a supervised video call to see if Sophia wanted ongoing contact. Amara's hands trembled as she read the letter. Ginseng found her crying in the garden, tears of overwhelming emotion rather than sadness. She wants to meet me, Amara said. My daughter. After 12 years. She wants to know who I am. Of course she does, Ginseng said, settling beside her on the bench. You're her mother. That matters, even when adoption provided her with a wonderful life. You should go to London. Meet her properly. Take as much time as you need. Come with me, Amara said impulsively. I want you there. I want Sophia to meet my husband, to know I'm not alone anymore, that I built a life even while missing her. Ginseng hesitated. The travel might be too much for my heart. Then we'll bring doctors. Arrange for medical support. Do whatever it takes. Amara gripped his hand. You gave me the resources to find her. Let me share this moment with you. They traveled to London a month later, bringing a private nurse and portable medical equipment. The meeting with Sophia was arranged at a neutral location, a cafe near her adopted parents' home, with them present for support. Amara's first glimpse of her grown daughter, 12 years old now, poised and articulate, nearly undid her completely. Hi, Sophia said shyly. You look like me. I mean, I look like you. You're beautiful, Amara managed. So beautiful. And clearly loved. Your parents, they've done an amazing job raising you. They're great, Sophia agreed, glancing at her adopted parents with obvious affection. But I always wondered about you. Why you gave me up. If you ever thought about me. Every day, Amara said honestly. I left Nigeria to work overseas so I could send money for you to have opportunities one couldn't provide. I believed I was supporting you all these years. When I found out the truth, that you'd been adopted and I'd been sending money to the wrong child, it was devastating. But seeing you now, seeing how happy and healthy you are, I know your adopted parents gave you everything I couldn't. And I'm grateful. They talked for 2 hours, Sophia asking questions about Nigeria, about Amara's life in Korea, about Ginseng. The old man charmed her with stories about Amara's stubbornness and kindness, painting a picture of their unusual marriage that made Sophia laugh. So you married him even though he's super old? Sophia asked with 12-year-old bluntness. I married him because he's kind and honest and he helped me find you, Amara corrected gently. Age is just a number when you find someone who sees you clearly and values who you are. Before they left London, they established plans for ongoing contact, monthly video calls, annual visits if possible, and a trust fund. Ginseng insisted on setting up for Sophia's future education. The adopted parents were gracious about sharing their daughter, recognizing that knowing her biological mother's story enriched Sophia's understanding of herself rather than threatening their family bond. On the flight back to Seoul, Amara held Ginseng's hand and realized fully what their marriage had become. It had started as transaction, legal status for companionship, but it had transformed into genuine partnership. They were building a life together in whatever time remained, and that life had meaning beyond practical considerations. I love you, she said, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere between contract and convenience, I fell in love with you. Ginseng's eyes glistened. I've loved you since you told me I was being unreasonable about my medication 5 years ago and refused to back down when I glared at you. But I was afraid to say it because I didn't want you to feel obligated to return the sentiment. I'm not obligated, Amara assured him. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Choosing us. For however long we have. They had 14 more months. Ginseng's heart finally gave out peacefully in his sleep, with Amara beside him holding his hand just as they'd slept for the past year. He was 73. She was 36. And against all odds, they'd built something real from the most transactional of beginnings. At the funeral, Ginseng's children were civil but cold, clearly resentful of Amara's inheritance. She didn't care. She had what mattered, the knowledge that he died loved, that their marriage had been genuine despite its unusual start, and that she'd given him exactly what he'd asked for: companionship, care, and someone who'd miss him when he was gone. Hit that subscribe button if this story made you believe in unconventional love. Drop a comment about the most important relationship in your life, and smash like if you think sometimes the best marriages are the ones nobody expects to work. A year after Jinsang's death, Amara used her inheritance to establish a foundation helping foreign workers in Korea avoid the scams she'd fallen victim to. She maintained her Korean citizenship, splitting time between Seoul and London so she could build a relationship with Sophia while honoring the life she'd built with Jinsang. And she kept his ashes in an urn on the mantel of the house that was now hers, occasionally talking to him about her day the way she had when he was alive. "I miss whispering your name," she told the urn one quiet evening. "I miss you correcting my Korean pronunciation. I miss your terrible jokes. I miss you." But she also knew he'd want her to live fully, to use the security he'd provided to build the life she deserved. So she did. She traveled, she worked, she built relationships with both her biological and adopted families. She dated occasionally, though nobody compared to the complicated, generous, impossible man who'd offered her marriage when she'd needed it most. Their love story wasn't traditional. It didn't start with passion or romance. But it was real, and it was theirs, and Amara would spend the rest of her life grateful that she'd said yes to a dying man's proposal. Because sometimes the most practical decisions lead to the most profound love. And sometimes marriage is less about romance and more about choosing to build a life with someone who sees you clearly and values who you are. Jinsang had seen her, had valued her, and in return, she'd given him exactly what he'd asked for: a companion who chose to stay, who genuinely missed him when he was gone, and who made his final years matter. If this story touched you, if you believe love comes in forms we don't expect, subscribe now and share this with someone who needs to know that unconventional relationships can be the most meaningful ones.